So all of these new federal regulations are going to be coming out within the next 10 years. These are just the ones we know of. There might be more things that'll come out also. They're all going to require implementation. So the challenge isn't unique to administrators, though. It's going to be really challenging to the regulated community as well.
Welcome to the Make Water Work podcast, where we dive into the people, ideas, and innovations shaping the future of water. I'm your host, Isaac Pellerin, and alongside my co-host, Megan Glover, the founder of 120 Water, we bring you insights from hundreds of incredible conversations we've had over the past 9 years with inspiring and energizing leaders in the water industry. Each week, we share those stories and conversations with entrepreneurs, community champions, and innovators who are making water work for everyone. Whether you're a water professional, a curious innovator, or simply passionate about our most precious resource, this podcast is for you. Let's get started. Welcome to the Make Water Work podcast, where we celebrate the people who are innovating and serving in the water industry. We love getting to have these conversations so much. And Megan, tell us who we have today.
Yes, we have a wonderful guest today that we are celebrating, Stacy Jones with the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. And I'll go into Stacy's bio in just a minute because she's had a wonderfully tenured career with IDEM, with the exception of a few-year stint at Indiana American Water. But I first spotted, I can't even say I met Stacy at one of my very first Indiana AWWA shows. And I knew, I knew where Stacy worked and kind of her span of control, if you will. But what caught my eye about Stacy is she was wearing a DePaul lanyard. Oh. And that's what we share. We share an alma mater. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking there aren't that many liberal arts graduates that I come across in water and environment. I'm like, I'm going to meet this person. Yeah. And it's one of the many things that I've loved about being in this industry is not only do you connect the dots and the work that you do, but the connections that you share. And so on the podcast today, we have Stacy Jones. Wonderful to have you, Stacy, joining the podcast today. I'm going to go in a little bit of your background and your bio because it's something to be celebrated for sure. As I mentioned, with the brief 3-year stint with Indiana American Water, she has been with the IDEM, which is the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, the drinking water branch at IDEM, since March of 1992. And she's held various positions, including regulatory implementation specialist with the drinking water branch. And most recently, she is now the section chief of the chemical and surface water compliance section for the division. So we are just thrilled to have you on the podcast today. And I think I'm really excited for you to share a day in the life of what you do, because it's not a role and it's not kind of a view that we get every day. So just appreciate you being on the podcast, Stacy. So we always like to start off and turn it to you because everyone has a story. They're all very fascinating. How did water find you?
That's a good question. So the summer after I graduated from college, I actually worked with it was the then Soil Conservation Service, which is now the National Resources Conservation, NRCS. But I worked with them on the Wetlands Conservation Project. So it was kind of a soil water combo sort of thing. Okay. We were basically looking for hydric soils to determine whether people would get farm subsidies or not for draining or not draining their fields. And so I did that during the summer, and that next year I started grad school at Ball State University and ended up focusing my studies mostly in soil and water.
Okay.
So I had a couple of temp jobs after I finished grad school, and then I, ended up basically got a call from a temporary agency saying, hey, we have these positions at IDEM. Are you interested in this? And like, sure, why not? And like I said, I ended up in the drinking water branch as a environmental scientist 3. But yeah, it was very interesting. So, but yeah, and I've been here pretty much ever since. I mean, I left for a little bit and went to work for a water company. But yeah, other than that, I've been doing various different things at IDEM.
Yeah, that's great context to get the opportunity to go from the regulatory side, work for the utility, and then go back in, kind of having some of that contacts and some of that learning. I am curious, like, did you always know that you wanted to land at the regulatory side, and kind of what drew you into that role?
So I've actually been on both sides. And during my 3 years with Indiana American Water, I worked with the different American water systems in Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan, just helping to ensure that they didn't miss any of their state required monitoring. I also helped compile and review the consumer confidence reports for all those systems. For a short period of time, after the company got purchased by a German company, and that German company also owned Thames Water. And we did some really fun reports. We did a report that actually looked at how many liters of petrol and how many metric tons of paper were used in any given month.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it's some different reporting and stuff. So I spent the first 9 years that I was with IDEM, so this would be before that regulatory piece, working with total coliform and lead and copper rules, and then and also helping draft state regulations. And basically, we're drafting those state regulations. You're working from the federal regulatory language. After my stint with Indiana American, I was rehired by IDEM's regulatory implementation specialist, helping to implement the new rules and also working with legal counsel to ensure that all the federal rules were adopted by the state. In that role, the role that I had as a regulatory implementation specialist, I worked with US EPA on the state EPA work groups for the LCR short-term revisions, lead and copper rule short-term revisions in 2007, and also on the initial draft of what finally became the LCRR. So they had a state implementation work group in the 2010, 2011-ish timeframe. I provided background material and presentations to the National Drinking Water Advisory Council's lead and copper rule subgroup. And I've been involved with both the LCRR and LCRI implementation work groups with EPA, and helping to put together guidance documents and things like that, reviewing those. And I'm currently also chair of the ASDRA Regulatory Committee. So I don't know that I necessarily knew that I always wanted to do regulatory work. It's just that I got put into a position where water found me, and it was regulatory, and I was good at it.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I love that. And I think that might be a good segue in maybe educating our listeners and giving some appreciation for just practically speaking how regulations work here in the US and the important role of you have federal regulations and then you have state implementation, and then there is an art and a science that goes along with taking those and interpreting and ultimately ensuring the as much compliance within a state as you can achieve. And Stacy is a master at this.
Yeah.
Indiana just continuously is a model of good for how you implement, new and existing regulation. So can you maybe educate our listeners, Stacy, in just how regulations flow from federal to state and kind of your role in ensuring that they get implemented?
Okay, so most regulations are put together at the federal level. EPA does have a process that they are required to follow based on the requirements of the Safe Drinking Water Act. They put contaminants on the contaminant candidate list, and then they make determinations as to whether they need to be regulated or determination that they don't need to be regulated.
Okay.
So that's kind of the initial process. There's three things that EPA has to consider in determining if a contaminant should be regulated. Is there an analytical method? Is there occurrence data? And are there health effects at levels where you can analyze and at levels at which the contaminant occurs?
Okay.
So you've got to have health effects, you've got to have data, and you've got to have a method.
Way to measure. Okay.
Because obviously you can't regulate something if you can't test for it.
Yeah.
I think that's so key.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is key.
So the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule is the tool that's usually used to collect that occurrence data, although sometimes EPA will ask for if there's other data out there, like is there data on this specific type of contaminant or something that they're looking at regulating, and sometimes they'll ask for additional data. They call them information collection rules.
Okay.
And they'll just ask for data that's out there. Some states will also regulate certain contaminants based on what's found in their state. Indiana typically just follows the federal rules, so we're not doing any of that. But we do have to incorporate all the federal rules into the state administrative code.
Yeah.
So basically what we're asking is that the systems follow the federal regulations.
And, oftentimes for folks that may not be super familiar with the process, and I'm going off script a little, but I promise this will be a softball, an easy question, who don't understand the process of what it takes to say, I'm just going to use microplastics in my water. Yes, you do. But from identifying you have microplastics to actually getting that to become a regulated contaminant can take decades. Mm-hmm. And correct me if I'm wrong, Stacy, but I think this whole process that you described is not something like, okay, in this calendar year, we're going to study this, and then therefore next year, these are going to now be new, contaminants or candidates on SDWA, correct? Or in your experience, like how long do you think it takes from, hey, we've identified a new contaminant and we believe this is something that needs to be regulated? Do you have an average?
You're probably looking 6 to 10 years at least.
Yeah.
Because the contaminant candidate list, I want to say it's a 5 or 6 year time frame on each one of those. Mm-hmm. And then the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, the 5th one just ended.
Okay.
Well, is ending this month.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Where systems were testing for PFAS, for 29 of the PFAS contaminants and lithium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so they have not proposed UCMR 6 yet. They will propose probably next year and finalize the year after that, with sampling probably, we're looking at, it's a 3-year window where all the systems do the sampling. Mm-hmm. So it's a 5-year window just to get the data that you need.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which kind of makes sense. There's it kind of goes back to that thing that you were saying where you have to identify the process, the analytical method, have a study, understand how scalable that method is and how standardized that can be. And then...
a lot of these things are going on at the same time, but you have to have the method before you can test for it in UCMR.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And ultimately, potentially guidance on remediation as well.
Yeah. Identifying the best available technologies.
Yeah, if you can't remove it, then
yeah.
And it becomes just okay, here, learn about this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then does that, then at I know you mentioned Indiana, generally follows federal. Obviously, given your expertise on committees and such, you have access to a lot of what other states, are doing as well. Is that timeline the same on state regulations, or would you say states tend to be able to move faster when they identify particular areas of concern?
I think it really depends on the state. A lot of them already had PFAS regulations in place before PFAS came out. Massachusetts and California already regulate perchlorate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those upcoming
yes. Yeah.
changes and proposed rules out there. So those are probably the next 2 we're going to see. So
okay.
Out of EPA.
Yeah. So knowing all of this, what is a day in the life of your role? Like, what if you could describe what a day in the life of your job? What is it like?
So my typical day includes working with my staff. I have 7 of them, basically to help ensure that all of their work is being completed. Their work entails keeping track of all of the lead and copper rule requirements, system testing for VOCs, SOCs, IOCs, radionuclides, nitrate, reviewing consumer confidence reports, stage 2 disinfection byproducts, and all of the surface water treatment rules, and then also tracking the PFAS initial monitoring requirements. So we've got a lot of stuff on our plate. And attending meetings.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
answering people's questions, training people. I mean, there's all kinds of different things out there that I'm doing, but that's generally that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's bailing me out when when you said meetings, it brought back the memory of, regulation can be complex. And so there's a number of meetings that we were in the same room and I may have been presenting on what's coming with lead and copper rule revisions. And I remember a handful of those where it got heated, where, operators were like, this is a big burden for us to take on, which is true. And sometimes it's a little bit of therapy, letting people air their anger and their frustrations. And after one particular incident, you told me that I'm really good at taking punches, and so I took that as a compliment. But sometimes it was like, hey, we have this question, why is this? And I'd be like, Stacy's in the room, and you'd be like, here's what I can answer. You've always been able to articulate with clarity coming from the state, like, here's how Indiana is going to implement this, and here's how we're thinking about it, while still addressing the concern and saying, this is a big deal. Like, this is a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to double click on that because I think, Stacy is being modest with her team, because I think you bring up a good point. And one of, I think, a superpower that you have, Stacy, and the team, and that what you've developed is you guys have to be ultra communicators, because all of these programs that you describe, you have to basically incite action and enablement across potentially 1,300 systems of varying degrees of sophistication across a state. And we've had a lot of communicators on this podcast, Kelly, Chelsea, Mike. And, we all know that is a really, really difficult job, communicating something net new and then driving the action and the behavior that you need is a real kind of skill that I think, Stacy and team kind of have to have, and work with partners like Isaac, yourself, and making sure that whether it's them or whoever they're relying on to get the message out is coming from a place of strong content, one message, and how we're going to kind of enable a state to act on that. Yeah.
And when there's some ambiguity, like you were talking about the just being on, was it 2007, the lead and copper rule, those initial revisions. And so there's always this like timeline of here's what's coming and here's where there's still some aspects that need to get clarified, but here's what you need to do now. And that was a journey for all of us, from 2021 to 2024, kind of living in a little bit of ambiguity and delivering clarity.
Which part of what rule are we doing? And
sorry, PTSD.
PTSD. I know. We were at a conference and someone just started calling it LCR 2.0, and I'm like, I like that. Just whatever. LCR 2.0. Let's just throw away what we know and just call it the 2.0. So actually, I like that, Isaac. Stacy, would you mind unpacking a little bit how the regulatory landscape has changed? I mean, obviously, Isaac and I are newer to it, and obviously the lead and copper rule is very kind of our entry point into it, but you have so much background. How has the regulatory landscape changed since you entered the space?
So when I first started, this was 1992. Okay. So community water systems were testing for total coliform, IOC and VOC, radionuclides, and if they disinfected, TTHMs, total trihalmethanes. Non-community water systems were testing for total coliform.
That's it?
That's,
in 1992.
That's pretty much it.
Wow.
Wow.
So in 1992, 1993, a whole bunch of new rules came out. We got the whole new suite of everything. So we now added nitrates, SOCs, additional VOCs. So collectively, those SOCs and VOCs were the phase 2, 2B, and 5 rules that came out of EPA. Lead and copper and surface water treatment rule. This was in the era after the 1986 amendments to the Safe Drinking Water Act, where it was basically you shall regulate at least 23 new contaminants every 3 years, period.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's
And
an
then
interesting rule.
that changed in the 1996 amendments to the contaminant candidate list and using UCMR and stuff like that. So think of how many more contaminants we would have if we had 23 every 3 years since 1993.
Who came up with that?
You need to highlight that and say, here's what it could have been if this never changed.
I know. Oh my gosh.
So then we added revisions to the radionuclides rule, revisions to the arsenic rule, updated the disinfection byproducts rules to lower the MCL for TTHMs and added an MCL for haloacetic acids.
Wow.
We updated the requirements for surface water treatment to better protect against cryptosporidium after an outbreak in Milwaukee. There were improvements to the lead and copper rule, and then even more improvements to the lead and copper rule based on what happened in Flint and other places around the country. And yeah, it's going to be ever evolving.
Ever evolving. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Do you, are there any of those that were particularly more challenging than others to implement?
The lead and copper has always been the most confusing rule to implement.
Interesting.
There's just so many different things. It's relatively straightforward if you're a small or medium-sized system and you've never had an action level exceedance.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have any lead service lines.
Yep. Yep.
Even after LCRI goes into effect, they're still going to be doing basically the same thing that they were doing in 1993.
That's a great point. Yep. Sampling.
They might be revising sampling sites. You're just going to call it a different tier because the tier classifications changed. But for any system that's had an action level exceedance, has lead service lines, has galvanized lines requiring replacement, there's just going to be so many more things that are going to have to come up and just trying to figure out how to implement that. I remember when the LCRR came out and they were looking at, you've got LCRR and the requirement with you had the action level and the trigger level. There were just so many different numbers. And when they were working on LCRI, that was my point to EPA all the time. It's like, we cannot implement this with two different numbers in there. Give us one number.
Right.
So they lowered they lowered the action level, but at least they got rid of that trigger level.
Yeah.
So, and I remember being in the EPA's, basically their briefing with the states and ASDWA after that rule came out, and having EPA actually mention me by name.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, Stacy, we've got one number. So
yeah, no, that was so important because I think, and that's back to Megan's point about the superpower of communication. Ultimately, bringing clarity to it was really important, and I'm kind of curious too. Of all the different things from your perspective, if you're thinking about water utilities, like we definitely know lead and copper is complex to implement for a water utility. Are there other contaminants or things that they are regulating that have that level of complexity, or is that kind of a standout one, or which other ones?
That one's lead and copper is definitely the most complicated.
Interesting.
But yeah, there's the PFAS stuff is going to be interesting, interpreting the initial monitoring results and trying to determine what compliance monitoring is going to look like. Because it all depends on, even for systems that don't have detections, it depends on what levels the lab is.
Yes, that's right.
Using.
Exactly.
Because if the lab's not actually detecting to half of that number, then the systems are still going to have to do quarterly monitoring when compliance monitoring starts. And yeah, so that one's going to be just kind of keeping track of who's got to do what when. But lead and copper definitely has the most moving pieces.
Yeah. And you bring up such a good point about your role as that intermediary also between the EPA in the states, and that there is a feedback loop. It's not just here are these things we're going to cram down. I mean, like you are instrumental. You and your colleagues are instrumental at, hey, no, this is the practical feedback that we need to send back up to the EPA. And to your point, and sometimes, things get changed because of it, right? And sometimes they don't. And sometimes they stay gray, right? And you kind of have to call the ball on certain things. Keep me accountable, if I'm out of turn speaking, like that. But I think that is also such an important role, not only what you do for your state, but what you do with the EPA to make sure what we're actually implementing as a community is practical, it's reasonable. And where does affordability in your mind kind of come into play with all of these regulations?
I mean, EPA does all the affordability piece of it.
Yeah.
We don't have staff available to do those same basically background checks that EPA does when they're doing rules to try to provide. I mean, we have done some of the those numbers don't seem right a little bit when EPA comes out with proposed rules.
Yeah.
But like when we're putting the rules into the state rule format and going through the state rulemaking process, basically what we're going with is there is no net cost to the systems of having a state regulation because they already have to comply with the federal.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. So many moving pieces.
Yeah. And I think that kind of leads to where are the pieces going to move next? Like
I know.
When you look at the next 10 years, what do you think it's going to look like for water administrators?
We'll likely be trying to do more with the same resources we currently have. There are so many more changes coming out there in the federal regulatory landscape, full implementation of LCRI, the consumer confidence reports, whatever the PFAS rules end up looking like after the revisions that EPA is proposing to make. The perchlorate rule, which the proposed rule should be out January 2nd, I think was the court-ordered deadline on that. And then microbial disinfection byproducts are up after that. They're still working on the finalized version of the water system restructuring rule. So all of these new federal regulations are going to be coming out within the next 10 years. These are just ones we know of. There might be more things that'll come out also. But they're all going to require implementation. So the challenge isn't unique to administrators, though. It's going to be really challenging to the regulated community as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thinking about, ahead in those challenges, what would you say to folks that are maybe interested in joining the water community and think, I would like to learn more about, this particular, joining on the regulatory side, because my guess is we probably need a pipeline of great talent to join you and your team. Maybe not, but my assumption is we probably do. What advice would you have for young professionals who might be considering a career and what's a pitch to join your field?
So if you're looking for a way to protect human health and the environment, working as a state regulator can be a really good role for you. There's many different regulatory roles out there. We have inspectors, compliance staff, people who help focus on water system capacity, which is
that's interesting.
Financial, managerial, and technical capacity. We have people who focus on water system security, people who ensure that the operators running the treatment plants are properly trained and certified, permit engineers, and many others. So that's just within drinking water. There's in addition, helping to get funding out to water systems for needed improvements is also an important role. In Indiana, that function is housed within the Indiana Finance Authority, which is a different agency, but in many states, it's also part of the drinking water program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So lots of different ways that you could even explore. And what it seems to me too is once you get in, the opportunities to maybe cross-pollinate some of these areas, are kind of endless if you can really get in and have an open mind to where it could take you.
Yeah. Yeah. Understanding where your talent can have an impact is such an important piece for young professionals, to kind of say, hey, here's my skill set. I do care about protecting public health, and what roles are there for me. And so, I think you've blazed a trail, kind of showing like it evolves, and it's not just like having an impact in your state, but also being able to advocate for and shape and help evolve federal policy.
Absolutely.
And just that relationship between federal, state systems and the public is just really critical.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just, and it's just, I just, want to thank you, Stacy, for being such a great sounding board and kind of inspiration. The way you've helped kind of 120 and myself and others on the team navigate this, and in a way that we can understand and then build practical solutions. You've been such a, wonderful mentor. So I'm curious, who inspires you? You inspire me. Who inspires you?
Many of the people that I've worked with at EPA throughout the years inspire me, but I was especially inspired during my early days working with lead and copper by our Region 5 lead and copper specialist, Miguel Del Toral. And he was always very approachable and helped me to learn so much about the rule, but he was also instrumental in the early EPA oversight in Flint. So he's been involved through all of that process. And I actually have a section of lead pipe that he sent to me that came from his yard in Chicago when they had torn down the original house that was on the building that was on the property and were building a new house on it. And as they were excavating, they found a section of lead pipe, and he actually sent me a section of lead pipe from his yard. So,
oh my gosh,
there's few people that appreciate that gift, but we totally get it.
We totally entered water nerd.
I have a section of pipe from EPA Region 5 administrator, his yard.
Yeah, it's a good podcast when you've officially gone there. That's amazing. Well, Stacy, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. And if there are folks that would love to learn more from you, where can they find you?
They can find me on
LinkedIn. Yeah, I was gonna say
they can find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Good.
You can probably go ahead and tag me.
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
We'll tag you and appreciate. I think I continuously learn a lot and appreciate the time, and thanks for all you do for our industry and me personally and 120 Water.
It's so great to have you, Stacy.
Thanks.
Isaac, it was great to talk to Stacy. I loved having her on the podcast because I do feel like not a lot of people understand, at least I certainly didn't before I got into water, all of the nuances of what does it take to make water policy, and then how does that policy go from federal government to state government. And I think we just learned today that there is a secret sauce. There are whispers like Stacy that are literally negotiating up and down the value chain and just really trying to do their best to implement something so that all of the systems in their community can make better water. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I felt like it was a good way of making it accessible, kind of remind me of like a Schoolhouse Rock version of water policy and how all this comes together. And I think Stacy just, she does a great job of communicating, at least every time I see her in the state of Indiana, talking about what's coming down. But you also just learn how these things evolve.
That's a great point.
We talk about rules that we need or ways that we need to protect water quality, and we absolutely need that. We also need to know how we're going to measure it, how we're going to remediate, and that, just kind of peeling back some of the layers of like, this is why it doesn't happen overnight.
That's right.
There is a process to it, and there are people who lead the process. And Stacy's such a great example of that.
That's a great point.
And we really hope that you were able to glean so much insight from Stacy and the conversation that we had here. Please, if you enjoyed this episode, like, subscribe, share, and we can't wait to have you join us next time on the Make Water Work podcast. Thanks for listening to the Make Water Work podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. Connect with us on LinkedIn or send us a message. Together, we can make water work for everyone.